Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and today we're going to talk about Damascus steel. More specifically, what it is it any good, and some good knives that use it. These are some of the best Damascus folding knives you can get right now in 2020. Now, for some people out there, there's actually a lot of confusion as to what Damascus steel actually is. Folks who ask, is Damascus steel any good? Now, the short answer is yes. Well-made Damascus steel can be very good, but not all Damascus is created equal. Now, the modern era of Damascus steel, now we're not talking about historical Damascus or Wootz steel. It was ushered in by the late, great Bill Moran in the 1970s as he created a line of what he called Damascus knives using the time-proven concept of pattern welding. This is two or more different steels layered and folded over on itself multiple times, and then usually acid etched at the end. Now, the two steels are going to react at different rates to the etchant, which is why you get the dark and light striations on the surface of the steel. So it goes to reason that the performance of any given Damascus steel is directly tied to the steels used in its layers. Now, all that information gives you an idea of what Damascus is, but it doesn't really give you an idea of the performance of any given steel unless you know what it's made out of. So let's go over a few examples of different grades of Damascus steel, and I'll show you some knives that use it. First, we're going to look at Alabama Damascus, seen here on a Kershaw leak. Now, it used to be that the only name in town as far as quality affordable Damascus goes was Alabama Damascus. It's made in America, typically from 5160 and 15N20 carbon steels. The result is a very tough blade steel that can take a nice fine edge, but it's not stainless, so you are going to have to keep it cleaned and lightly oiled to keep it from rusting. Although some of their steels can be folded over into very precise, repeatable patterns, most of what you see on the Kershaw stuff is a so-called random pattern Damascus. Kershaw uses this steel in several of their models, some of which can be had for less than $100, including this leak, which is about $85 right now. You can also get the scallion and chive models, the dividend and the bare knuckle, and more besides that, but we picked the leak to show you right now because it's one of the most classic and successful EDC designs out there, and it's a great gentleman's pocket knife, especially in this form. Got a nice long and narrow Wharncliffe style blade, and because the steel is nice and tough, even though you have a very acute tip, it's going to be less prone to snapping than a more brittle stainless steel would be. The handles on this model are stainless steel, nice and clean, and it creates a nice contrast to the heavily patterned steel itself. On the back, you can see we have a frame lock for security, and this is a Ken Onion design, and it also comes with one of Ken Onion's innovations in the knife industry, and that's his speed-safe assisted opening mechanism. It means you're going to have precise and repeatable action every time, and because it's nice and narrow and carries so easily, this is a fantastic option for a ton of folks out there to get everything you need done day to day. Now, a newcomer to the budget Damascus realm is Civivi, which itself is the budget sister brand to the more premium WE knife company. Now, their process is proprietary, but their steel is based on 9CR18 MOV stainless steel, which is essentially 440C. So what that means is you're going to get solid performance. And they managed to get knives with stainless Damascus blades under the $100 price point, which is pretty impressive. I myself have been testing this particular Civivi Chronic, which comes in at about $80, and I've been very happy with the performance of the blade steel. This knife right here, though, is probably our favorite Civivi to carry a Damascus blade right now. It's the Platheros, designed by Elijah Isham, coming in just under the $100 ceiling. We get a lot of blade steel here, about 3.4 inches with a nice broad and sweeping cutting profile going on. Now, this is a flipper knife, but you can't actually see the flipper tab because very cleverly, when it's closed up, you just have a hint of the flipper tab sticking straight up instead of out. Helps it keep it a little more streamlined in the pocket and easier to take in and out, but it's still nice and easy to flip just like any other flipper, because like most other Civivis, we've also got ball bearings in the pivot to keep that action nice and tight. The handles here look like carbon fiber on the top. That's because they are, but they're not quite. This is actually a G10 laminate. We've got black G10 as the base with the top layer of carbon fiber, and then they mill down into the G10 so you get a couple different layers going on, which looks really good. Got a liner lock to keep things secure, and a nice deep carry pocket clip that can go on either side. Lets just a little bit peek up above the clip, but it's nice and narrow there near that clip, so it's going to stay nice and unobtrusive while it is in your pocket. Now, with the next grade of Damascus we're going to talk about, the Damascus steel itself isn't actually doing the cutting action, and that's a Damascus blade with a different core steel. You see this from a few companies, and essentially they're combining modern Damascus steel techniques with older laminated blade steel techniques, essentially using a higher performance core of steel sandwiched between two layers of Damascus cladding on the either side. You see this a lot on kitchen knives, such as this Shun Classic paring knife, which is a premium blade coming in at just under $100, featuring a VG10 stainless steel core. You can see this has a more subtle pattern to its Damascus, because they haven't really etched it to reveal the pattern as much as some of these other steels. It gives us perhaps a more refined look, and then you can even still see the line of the laminate right behind the edge where the VG10 takes over from the cladding. Now, this whole process lets them achieve the good looks of Damascus steel for less money, since they don't have to worry about the edge retention on the Damascus portion itself, so they don't have to spend quite as much on those materials. This knife itself, in typical Japanese fashion, is ground very thin at the edge with a very acute edge angle. So this is going to be a revelation in the kitchen if you've only used Western style or German chef's knives up to this point. The handles are quite different too. You can see we don't have rivets. We actually have a hidden tang with a stabilized pack-a-wood handle. What that means is it's not going to be as susceptible to shrinking or cracking or warping as natural wood will be, because you have essentially some glue in there holding everything together. The shape is also a little bit different. We have kind of a D-shaped handle because they do make these right-hand biased. And with that shape, it really does fit right into the hand extremely well. Feels like it was made to be there and you're ready to cut. Now you'll see this blade steel technique in the world of folding pocket knives too. Here's an Mkusta knife, the MC1, featuring Damascus with a VG10 core, and the classic Spyderco Delica with very similar blade configuration. The Spyderco Delica is a classic for a reason, and this one comes in just over $200. Definitely a more premium folder. It's got stainless steel handles, and pay no attention to kind of the clear sticker here. We didn't want to take that off. It's there to keep it from getting scratched in transit. But with that handle material, again, it's a great option for a gentleman's pocket knife and would make a great space to do some engraving too if you wanted to customize your knife. It's a good size for most folks for everyday carry. My hands are a little bit on the larger side, but I've still got plenty of room. We've got a 4-position pocket clip, just like the base model, so you can carry this wherever you want, and an ambidextrous lockback mounted midway down the spine with a nice little boy dent there to help prevent accidental closure until you're ready. But the blade itself, as I said, we've got Damascus cladding over a VG10 core, and it looks stunning on this particular blade. It's ground with a lot of precision, just like every Spyderco out there, and one of the things you see on this knife that you don't necessarily see on every Damascus knife, you can actually see the separation of the layers on the spine itself. Now you can only see that because they've etched this and then left the spine alone. You can etch a blade and then clean up the spine a little bit on the grinder, and that's going to eliminate those marks. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's fake Damascus or anything like that, so I just want to clear that up right now. Now back to the Mkusta model. Honestly, they're a brand that's often overlooked, but they shouldn't be. This very cool MC1 model comes in at about $140. You get that premium steel and a very nice design wrapped around it. Again, you've got a VG10 core with Damascus cladding, this time with a straight clip point profile, fairly narrow in blade shape, so it's going to be very agile, and a very subtle hollow grind to keep it thin behind the edge. The back of the knife features a liner lock, dual liners in fact, underneath 2 layers of G10. And each side is sculpted, and even though you don't see a definite separation, it kind of reminds me a bit of bamboo, and the way these things are scalloped out, it fits very nicely into the hand. Nice and smooth, but still with a good solid amount of grip. I also like the pocket clip on this knife, even though I tend to prefer a tip-up blade orientation when closed. This is tip-down only, but it's nice and deep carry, and it's going to look nice and classy in your pocket, because this, again, like a lot of these knives, but not all, is going to make a great gentleman's knife. Now, all 3 of those knives were made in Japan and featured VG10 cores, and that's not the only steel that you see made with this process, but it's probably the most common in the production knife world at this point in time anyway. Now, when it comes to conventionally prepared Damascus steels in use by the higher-end knife makers of the world, there's 2 names you ought to know, Chad Nichols and Devin Thomas. You're going to see their stuff in all kinds of premium production, mid-tech, and handmade knives. Here we have the Spartan Harsey folder with a Chad Nichols stainless Damascus blade, which is primarily made with AEBL and 440C. Now, I myself love AEBL in its standard form. It's a nice, tough stainless steel that has a fine grain and holds a fine edge quite well. And the Spartan Harsey folder is a fantastic platform for this blade steel. We've got almost 4 inches of blade, and a titanium handle with a frame lock on the back. This particular one, being so pimped out like this, comes in at about 645 bucks. The blade itself is going to be excellent for just about anything out there. As I said, about 4 inches of this drop point profile, nice flat grind, a very versatile blade shape for everything from hunting to combat to, of course, your everyday carry stuff, which most of us are going to be using it for that, let's be honest. Now in this case, we've got an American flag graphic engraved into the titanium handle, and we've got an anodized purple finish. But as you move it around, you're going to sort of see some bronze, almost like an undercoat essentially. Some bronze highlights are kind of going to peek out through the purple, which is really cool as it kind of ties in to the back spacers and the thumb stud hardware. It's definitely a well-recognized premium knife in the premium knife world, and it even gives the Chris Reeve Sebenza a run for its money, which actually we're going to look at that next. And that's also going to let us take a look at some Devin Thomas Damascus. He's got several recognizable patterns that he creates, and his stainless is based on AEBL steel as well. Shown here is his ladder pattern on a Chris Reeve small Sebenza 21. Sebenza, of course, is perhaps the premium knife. This design ushered in the frame lock, which of course is everywhere these days. You can't throw a rock in our warehouse and not hit a frame lock knife. Not that we would actually recommend throwing rocks in there, but that's all right. This one is the small variant of the 21 iteration of the knife that's soon going to be giving way to the new Sebenza 31. We've got a titanium frame, and since this is a fancier version wearing that Damascus steel, we've also got Makassar ebony inlays. Although you can get these, of course, without Damascus blades, and you can also get these with a more plain handle with those Damascus blades if you want. For me personally, I have a non-Damascus version of pretty much this very knife, and it's my primary gentleman's knife, but the Damascus blade really puts it over the top. All right, the last category we're gonna look at is probably the king of the heap for a premium Damascus blade these days. We have Damasteel. Now, Damasteel is actually the company name, and they do make some non-Damascus steels for use in knives, but their Damascus product actually breaks some of the rules in the world of Damascus. Instead of being a folded ingot like everything else so far, their steel is actually created with the particle metallurgy process. And this allows for performance and edge retention that can rival the best super steels out there today. You can see it in high-end production knives, such as this Kaiser Mini Sheepdog and Benchmade Gold Class Mini Crooked River, as well as more mid-tech and custom stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, the Kaiser Sheepdog Mini is one of the best pocket cleavers out there, designed by Chris Conway, with this Damasteel version coming in at about $300. The design, it's a titanium frame ball-bearing flipper with a nice good feel in the hand thanks to the contouring that they've done to the titanium. Now, with the advantages of the Damasteel particle metallurgy process, they can do specific patterns, both more regular and more random. This particular blade comes in their Vinland pattern, which is a bit more on the random side of things. We've got a 2.6-inch blade with a flat grind and a swedge, with this big cleaver shape that makes it a powerful cutter despite the small size. And now for that gold class Benchmade. It is more expensive. In fact, most gold class knives typically are pricey, and this one comes in at $800. Definitely on the very high premium end of the spectrum now. This blade is also made with Vinland Damasteel, 3.4 inches long in this case because this is the Mini Crooked River. I always laugh because despite being called mini, it's kind of more of a medium size. Now the handles on this knife are more exotic to match the blade as well. After all, there's plenty of titanium frame-lock flippers using particle steel out there, so this stands out from the crowd even more than the Sheepdog. Now the main structure of the handle itself is made from marbled carbon fiber, which is kind of one of the in materials at the moment, and Rapier Illume Yellow Moon inlays, which is a really nice touch. They've even milled out some of the carbon fiber from the underside to match up with the lightning holes in the steel liners. As a result, that actually lets some of the light pass through the inlays, and you actually get some glow from inside the knife in the process. Now, the material essentially consists of a fine brass mesh that's been embedded in resin. It creates a very cool look, and it makes this one of the more actually subtly executed gold class Benchmates, because sometimes they really go out there with some really dramatic looks, but I like the more subtle look here because it's still unmistakably fancy and unmistakably premium. Now we come to the Ziba Custom MS3, which is one of our favorite executive knives here at the Knife Center, featuring a dense twist pattern Damasteel blade. Although we do have other patterns as well, and these come in at $465. Now MS3 stands for Manhattan Special 3 because this is a great city knife, coming in with a blade under the 3-inch mark. It has a simple, elegant handle that shines in its simplicity, and it really lets the attention stay on the blade. And then it's still very easy to carry every day as well because it doesn't take up a ton of space. Fold the blade up. It then completely disappears in the handle with just the tiny flipper tab sticking out. And it stays in there nice and good. This is really not likely to come out if you're trying to flick it open. You are gonna have to use the flipper. My personal favorite way to open this knife is with the lighter flick. Feels great, looks great, fantastic everyday carry. Finally, the big flex that we're gonna show you today, this is the Jerry Moen Mongoose featuring a super dense twist Damasteel blade and handle. Now, as a raw material, Damasteel is not cheap, and each of these handles is made from the same super dense twist as the blade. You can see how thick they are, which explains the high-end price of this knife at just under 1,300 bucks. Now, normally I would say this knife has a nice snaky look, but because it's named Mongoose, it's actually made to do battle with snakes, but it certainly does look like it's ready to strike. Got a little bit over 3.5 inches of blade with this nice recurve shape going on. In fact, the way the tip is oriented when you're using this, it may behave a little bit more like a Wharncliffe than any kind of drop point blade, even though the shape overall definitely does not say Wharncliffe. The handles look and feel great with that Damasteel. It is a little bit on the polished side. We've got this nice honeycomb texture, and it's scooped out and smoothed over in all the right places. It flips really nicely because at this price, it does have bearings, which it better. And the clip even kind of follows the same snaky good looks as the blade. There, I said it. It does have a snaky look going on. Very cool knife, and this is something with this type of execution really has nothing to prove. It really stands on its own. So that's all I've got in front of me right now, but this list leaves off plenty of quality knives out there, but I wanted to stick with things where we know the composition of the blade steel as opposed to others that we don't. Now, that doesn't mean that all of these steels are bad, it just means that some companies don't always advertise their base materials. But with companies like Boker, you've got some great models like the Excalibur 1, I would have no hesitation of putting their Damascus blades to use. So to wrap up, the question I have for you all is this. Do any of you use a Damascus blade for your EDC or in your kitchen? And would you add any one of these knives to your rotation? Let us know in the comments, and to get your hands on any of these really cool knives, we're gonna leave links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And while you're there, be sure you're signed up for our Knife Rewards program too. Because I've said it a lot, the only thing better than a new knife is free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.
Beans!
First, we're going to take a look at
Alabama?
Damascus.
I think there's a song in that.
No vibrato. I said the word subtle already.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear you say that.
I like it.
Usually don't like anything that other people like.
Well, nobody told me to like it.